download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, respiration is a very important process and it is about transferring energy from glucose, which goes on in every cell in the body. This takes place, you should hopefully remember from our video on cells, in the mitochondria of the cells. Now, it is very, very important to understand, and this is a very common misconception, that respiration is not breathing in and out. Because breathing takes place in our lungs and we're breathing in the air, which yes contains oxygen, and then we breathe out, which contains obviously nitrogen and lots of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Whereas respiration is really about taking this oxygen that we breathe in and transferring it in the reactions, transferring it into energy, which we can then use. Okay, so it's very, very important that we understand that respiration is not breathing in and out. They are different. Okay, so moving on from that, respiration is used for all kinds of different things. Okay, so for example, in our body, we need to build up or break down different molecules. So we need to build up proteins from amino acids. Okay, and that requires energy. It's also obviously very important in movement, in allowing our muscles to contract for movement. This requires energy. There's also as well, it's sort of maintaining our body temperature. Maintaining body temperature. So they are just three things that energy is really, really important for in animals and in humans. So build up or breakdown of different molecules, for movement and for maintaining a body temperature. And please, please, please remember, respiration is not breathing in and out. So really there are two different types of respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. And aerobic respiration is respiration using oxygen. Okay, so when oxygen is available, and we'll talk about when it isn't in a second, we use aerobic respiration. And you need to be able to remember the word equation and recognize a symbol equation for this. Okay, remember it also takes place in the mitochondria of our cells. So the equation for aerobic respiration is glucose plus oxygen makes carbon dioxide and water. Okay, now if you really look at that equation, you may notice that it's the opposite of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is water plus carbon dioxide makes oxygen plus glucose. So it's the reverse of photosynthesis. Okay, so glucose plus oxygen gives carbon dioxide plus water, and occasionally you might see in brackets plus energy, as it provides us our energy. Now you may have to recognize the symbol equation, so maybe you might remember that glucose is C6H12O6. Oh, that was too big for a 6 there, so let's try that again. So O6, there we go, plus oxygen, O2, it's carbon dioxide, CO2, plus water, H2O. And again, we have to balance that, but you'll remember it's exactly the same as photosynthesis, so it's the same numbers. So C6H12O6 plus 6O2 goes to 6CO2 plus 6H2O. And that's aerobic respiration. And remember, it takes place in the mitochondria of the cells. Now, because this breaks down glucose fully into carbon dioxide and water, this provides more energy than anaerobic respiration, and you'll see why in a second. Okay, so it provides more energy than anaerobic respiration. Ideally, in the wonderful world, we'd always aerobically respire. So anaerobic. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers, and so much more. The link is in the description. Aerobic respiration is used in the absence of oxygen, i.e. no oxygen, or in the absence, there's not enough oxygen. And this might be in situations, for example, when you've vigorously exercising. So you're running, you're sprinting really hard, and you're breathing in oxygen, but you're not breathing it in as quickly as you need it. So your body will start to anaerobically respire without the oxygen to keep that energy going, to keep providing energy. Now the symbol, the word equation for anaerobic respiration is just glucose, and it just gets broken down without oxygen into something called lactic acid. Okay, now you don't have to remember the symbol equation for this, however it might help in your understanding if I write out the symbol equation. Now what you can hopefully see here though is that glucose has not been fully broken down into carbon dioxide and water, and because of that it does not transfer as much energy, as I just said, as aerobic respiration. Okay, because it's not fully broken down, it does not transfer as much energy. So remember, anaerobic just means without oxygen, the incomplete breakdown of glucose, and it makes lactic acid. Now this lactic acid is quite toxic in our bodies and causes muscle fatigue. So if you're running, sprinting, and you suddenly get a stitch, that may be because you've got a build-up of lactic acid and you're getting muscle fatigue. So really we need to deal with this lactic acid, and we need to get rid of it, and we'll look into that in the next video on how we do that. But for now we just need to understand anaerobic respiration is respiration without oxygen. We're still transferring energy, we're still using glucose, but we're not transferring as much energy as in aerobic respiration. Now you also need to be aware of the equation for anaerobic respiration in plants. Now aerobic respiration in plants and animals is the same, but anaerobic is slightly different. Okay, they also respire without oxygen, but they produce not lactic acid, so they break down glucose to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. So this is anaerobic respiration in plants and also in yeast as well. Glucose is broken down into ethanol and carbon dioxide. Okay, and this is actually called fermentation. And we use this, as humans, we use this anaerobic respiration to our advantage. So for example, in the food industry, we use this to make bread and alcoholic drinks, for example. Okay, so in bread making, the carbon dioxide is used to make the bread rise. So used to make the bread rise. Whereas in beer and wine making, we use ethanol to make alcohol. Okay, so these are very, very important, and we use them in our lives to our advantage. So this reaction is called fermentation, and it's the breaking down of glucose to form ethanol plus carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is used to make bread rise, and the ethanol is used to make alcohol. So you've now learned about aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration differences. So now have a go at seeing how much you remember by answering these questions, and we'll go through the answers after. So pause the video now. Okay, so question 1, what is the word equation for aerobic respiration? Well, it's glucose plus oxygen. Here's the carbon dioxide plus water. So we breathe in the oxygen, obviously we breathe that in. We get the glucose for our food. We breathe out carbon dioxide, and the water can just move into the blood. And this obviously produces, or transfers, energy. Question 2, what are the reactants in aerobic respiration? Well, you remember the reactants are the things you're actually using to make the reaction happen, and they're the things on the left-hand side of the equation. So in this case, it's glucose and oxygen. What does aerobic mean? Well, it means with oxygen. So aerobic respiration is with oxygen, so it means with oxygen. Where does aerobic respiration take place? In the mitochondria in our cells. Why do muscle cells contain lots of mitochondria? For movement. Okay, movement requires lots of energy, and therefore they need lots of mitochondria to provide that energy. So 2 uses of the energy created or transferred in aerobic respiration. Well, to build up larger molecules is one, for muscles to contract for movement is another one, and also to maintain a body temperature is a third that we looked at. So any 2 from them. Number 7, when does anaerobic respiration take place? In the absence or when there's lack of oxygen. So it could be, for example, during vigorous exercise. What causes muscle fatigue? Well, it's the lactic acid buildup that causes that muscle fatigue. Number 9, what is the equation for anaerobic respiration in plants and yeast? So it's glucose breaks down to ethanol plus carbon dioxide. And finally, how do humans use anaerobic respiration in yeast? Well, they use the CO2 in bread making to make it rise, and they use the ethanol to make alcohol. So we've now looked at aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration, and the differences. We've also looked at the respiration in plants, the anaerobic respiration in plants and yeast as well, and we call that fermentation. So you can now move on to testing yourself with the quiz or going through the exam questions to make sure you really understand the topic. And as ever, if there's anything you don't understand, then please contact one of our tutors and we will be happy to help.